Okay, so let me just say this up front. The British monarchy has survived wars. It survived beheadings, abdications, affairs, scandals that would have destroyed any normal family 10 times over. But right now, in 2026, the biggest threat to the crown isn't a war. It isn't a political crisis. It's a question. One single question that Harry and Meghan have been running from for years. And the longer they run, the worse it looks. Because here's the thing. People are no longer just asking this question in random comment sections or conspiracy forums. Royal experts are asking it. Legal scholars are asking it. Members of parliament are asking it. And the palace? The palace is very, very quiet. Which, if you know anything about how the royals operate, is actually the loudest signal of all. So let's talk about what's actually going on. Because this story is way bigger than most people realize. And trust me, what we're about to get into goes way deeper than anything you've heard before. Hit subscribe if you're new here. And tell me in the comments, do you think something bigger is going on with Harry and Meghan? Let's get into it. Let's start with something that happened just a few weeks ago that I think most people completely glossed over. Harry and Meghan's wedding anniversary came and went. And nothing happened. Like, literally nothing. No post from the palace, no message from King Charles, nothing from William and Kate. And the Sussexes themselves? Silent. No Instagram moment, no carefully timed interview, no Netflix teaser, just complete and total silence from all sides. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe they just wanted privacy. Sure, except this is a couple that built an entire brand on telling the world about their relationship. These are the people who sat down with Oprah, who did a whole Netflix documentary about their love story, who have never once missed an opportunity to keep themselves in the headlines. So when their anniversary comes around and nobody says a single word, that's not privacy. That's something else entirely. And what makes it even more telling is the context. Because right now, in 2026, the Sussexes are not in a great place. The deals are drying up, the public interest is fading, and the palace has basically stopped acknowledging they exist. The world didn't turn against them exactly. It just kind of moved on. And for two people who desperately need the spotlight to survive, that might actually be worse. But here's where it starts to get really interesting. Because while everyone was noticing the silence around the anniversary, Harry and Meghan were quietly putting together what's being called an Australia tour. A whole royal-style trip. Appearances, engagements, the whole thing. Except they aren't working royals anymore. They don't represent the crown. So what exactly are they doing? A lot of people are calling it exactly what it looks like. A PR stunt. A desperate attempt to look relevant at the exact moment when everything back home is starting to fall apart. And things back home really are falling apart. Because late 2025 changed everything. That's when King Charles did something nobody expected. He started the formal process of stripping Prince Andrew of his royal titles, his HRH status, everything. Now, Andrew had already been pushed out of public life because of his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, but this was different. This was the king saying on the record, officially, that even a son of the queen can lose it all. That royal protection isn't automatic, that the crown protects itself first. And once that happened, everyone started asking the same question. If Andrew can be stripped of his titles, what about Harry? Because Harry isn't just someone who made bad decisions. Harry is someone who voluntarily walked away, who moved to another country, who went on television and criticized the royal family repeatedly, who has been in an ongoing legal war with British institutions for years. Andrew at least stayed quiet. Harry has been anything but quiet. So if the Andrew precedent means what people think it means, Harry and Meghan's situation just became a lot more serious than a family falling out. The palace knows this. Harry knows this. And the men behind the scenes who actually run the institution, they've been planning for this moment for a long time. Now let me introduce you to Angela Levin, because she's central to everything that's about to blow up. Angela Levin is not some random commentator. She's spent decades working inside the royal world. She's written extensively about Harry specifically, and she has sources that most journalists would kill for. When she says something publicly, it's because she's confident enough to say it publicly. And recently, she stopped hinting around and just came straight out with it. She raised the question of whether Archie and Lilibet were actually born in the way the law requires for them to hold their positions in the line of succession. And I want to be really clear here, because this is where people get confused. She wasn't just spreading gossip. She was raising a legal and constitutional question. A serious one. Because here's what most people don't know. British constitutional law is very specific about succession. To hold a legitimate claim to the throne, a child must be, in the legal language, born of the body. That's not just an old-fashioned tradition. It's an actual legal requirement. And when you look at the circumstances surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births, things get very murky very quickly. The doctor's signatures that traditionally appear on royal birth announcements were missing. The location of the births was confusing and inconsistently reported. The timing of announcements didn't follow any established pattern. And there were 0 hospital photographs. No stepping outside with the baby. No public medical bulletin. Nothing that the public has come to expect, and that, more importantly, the constitutional framework depends on. Now, Levin's point wasn't that she can prove anything. Her point was that the lack of documentation and transparency creates a legitimate constitutional problem. Because if there's genuine doubt, if the of-the-body standard can't be verified, then the legal standing of those children in the line of succession is shaky at best. And at worst, it's void. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to understand what royal birth transparency is actually for. Because it's not just tradition for tradition's sake. Think about Diana stepping out of the Lindo wing. Think about Kate doing the same thing after each of her 3 children, standing there in heels looking incredible while the rest of us would be horizontal for a week. That moment, that very specific public moment, exists for a reason. It's visual proof. It's a documented, witnessed, publicly confirmed event that tells the constitutional establishment and the public that the line of succession is intact. There was even a time when the Home Secretary had to be physically in the room during a royal birth. Like actually present, because the stakes were considered that high. That rule got updated over the years. But the principle behind it never changed. Transparency around royal births isn't optional, it's constitutional. And then Meghan came along and threw the whole thing out the window. No hospital steps, no public photos, conflicting reports about where the birth even happened. A level of secrecy that had never once been applied to a royal birth at this level in modern history. And look, plenty of people defended that, said she had a right to privacy, said the tradition was outdated and unfair to women. And maybe some of that is true. But what it also did was create a vacuum. And nature hates a vacuum. So other things rushed in to fill it. The moon bump theories. If you've spent any time online in the last few years, you know what I'm talking about. The idea that Meghan wasn't actually pregnant, and that the children were born via surrogate. Now, when this first started circulating, it was easy to dismiss. It lived in the dark corners of the internet alongside flat earth content and celebrity clone theories. Harry called it racist. A lot of people agreed with him. But here's the thing. The reason these theories didn't die is because the Sussexes never provided the simple, straightforward documentation that would have killed them. One clear medical record. One verified statement from the doctor who delivered the babies. One photograph from the hospital taken at the time. Any of those things would have ended the conversation on day one. Instead, what the public got was more secrecy, more deflection, and more legal threats, which only made people dig harder. And now, in 2026, those theories aren't living in dark corners anymore. They're being discussed in editorial meetings, by royal historians, by constitutional lawyers, by members of the government. That's not because people suddenly became meaner. It's because the questions were never answered, and unanswered questions don't disappear. They grow. Which brings us to where Archie and Lilibet actually are right now. Because honestly, does anyone know? Look at William and Kate's kids. George, Charlotte, Louis. We see them at Trooping the Color. We see them at Wimbledon. We see them at memorials and Christmas services and school events. They are visible. They are growing up in front of the country in a way that reflects their role and their place in the national story. Now look at Archie and Lilibet. When did you last actually see them? Not in a heavily edited Netflix clip. Not in a distant photograph taken with a long lens. Actually see them in a real public setting, clearly and recently. The answer for most people is that they genuinely cannot remember. These children have basically disappeared from public view entirely. And for kids who technically hold positions in the line of succession, who technically carry royal titles, that is deeply unusual. This isn't about making children uncomfortable in the spotlight. Nobody is asking for that. But there is a meaningful difference between protecting your children's privacy and making them invisible to the point where people start asking whether they're okay. The complete withdrawal has had the opposite effect of what Harry and Meghan probably intended. Instead of keeping the kids safe from scrutiny, it's made them the subject of the most intense speculation of anyone in the royal family. Now let's talk about Harry's response to all of this, because it tells you everything. Harry has become the most legally aggressive member of the royal family in living memory. He sues, he threatens, he files claims, he sends letters from lawyers. Any journalist, commentator, or institution that raises questions about his family gets a legal response. And look, I get it on a surface level. He's a dad. He wants to protect his family. That's understandable. But here's the problem. When someone is innocent, they provide evidence. They don't just throw legal threats at everyone asking questions. If someone accused you of something genuinely false, the first thing you do is prove it's false. You wouldn't spend years threatening everyone who brought it up while refusing to show the one document that would end the whole thing. Every time Harry's lawyers file a new claim, the public asks the same question. What is he actually afraid of? Because here's the thing about lawsuits that Harry seems to have missed. They don't just silence people. They open doors. Specifically, they open the door to legal discovery. And discovery is the last thing the Sussexes want. Let me explain why discovery is so dangerous for them specifically. If Harry takes a defamation or privacy claim to a British court over allegations related to the births, the judge can order the production of evidence. Not the evidence Harry wants to show. All of it. Medical records, hospital documentation, staff testimony, birth certificates with full verification. And yes, potentially, DNA testing. A courtroom doesn't care about anyone's brand. It doesn't care about a Netflix deal or a book deal or a carefully crafted public image. It cares about verifiable facts. And once a judge orders biological verification, the entire narrative that Harry and Meghan have built comes under a microscope it was specifically designed to avoid. For two people whose entire post-royal identity is built on controlling the story, that is not just a bad outcome. That is a catastrophic one. The courtroom is essentially kryptonite to everything they've constructed. And every time Harry escalates legally, he gets one step closer to walking straight into it. And it's not just coming from Harry's side. The British government has entered the conversation now. In 2026, there is serious parliamentary discussion around the Titles Deprivation Act. This is not some fringe political idea. This is actual legislation with actual precedent. It was originally used after World War I to strip titles from British peers who had fought against Britain. And now it is being seriously discussed in relation to the Sussexes. MPs are asking whether Harry and Meghan have brought the monarchy into enough disrepute to trigger this kind of action. And with the Andrew case as a template, those conversations have a roadmap now. There are active calls for a formal inquiry into the Sussex succession claims. Not from tabloid journalists, from elected officials. Think about what that means. This has moved beyond palace drama, beyond celebrity gossip. It is now a matter of political and constitutional concern for the British government. That is a completely different level of trouble than anything the Sussexes have faced before. Behind the scenes at the palace, the strategy is becoming pretty clear if you know what to look at. The senior advisors around King Charles are not panicking. They're not scrambling. They are executing a very deliberate, very patient plan. And the plan is simply this. let the Sussex branch of the family become irrelevant through isolation rather than confrontation. No public fights, no dramatic announcements, just a gradual, systematic removal of the oxygen they need to survive. No invitations to state occasions, no acknowledgement of their anniversaries or milestones, no engagement with their media appearances. Just silence. Careful, calculated, deliberate silence. And it's working. Because the thing that Harry and Meghan fear most isn't a dramatic public takedown. It's being treated like ordinary celebrities. Because ordinary celebrities don't have a claim to the throne. Ordinary celebrities can't use a royal title to sell a lifestyle brand. Ordinary celebrities are just people. And in a city like Montecito that is full of extraordinarily famous people, being just people is the worst possible outcome. Without the royal prefix, without the HRH, without the connection to the institution they left, Harry becomes a guy who used to be in the royal family, and Meghan becomes a former actress who married that guy. Their entire value proposition collapses. And speaking of value propositions collapsing, let's talk about the money situation, because it is not good. March 2026 brought confirmation that Meghan's Netflix lifestyle venture had effectively come to an end. The official version was that it was a natural evolution and the brand was moving forward independently. But people inside the industry described something very different. They described a partnership that Netflix had simply lost interest in. The audience numbers weren't there. The cultural moment had passed, and the streaming giant quietly moved on. That $100 million deal, which felt like the beginning of a whole new era when it was announced, is now basically a cautionary tale. The content it produced didn't generate the engagement that would justify renewal. And without that income flowing in, the math of the Sussex lifestyle gets very uncomfortable very fast. A 16-room mansion in Montecito, a full private security operation, staff, travel. The infrastructure of people who live like royalty doesn't come cheap, and the deals that were paying for it are disappearing one by one. Meghan's pivot to the lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, was supposed to solve this problem. The idea was clearly to build something in the Gwyneth Paltrow lane. Premium products, aspirational aesthetic, a founder with a fascinating personal story, and a built-in global audience. On paper, it makes sense. In practice, it has a fatal flaw. Gwyneth Paltrow's brand works because people believe in Gwyneth Paltrow. They trust her taste. They buy into her version of herself. But when your personal story is being actively questioned, when people are openly debating whether the most basic facts of your biography are true, that trust evaporates. Nobody wants to buy artisan jam from a duchess who might not be a duchess by the time the jar reaches the store shelf. The whole premise of the brand requires the customer to believe in Meghan. And right now, a lot of people simply don't. And look, through all of this, the ones I keep coming back to are Archie and Lilibet. Because whatever you think of Harry and Meghan, whatever judgment you make about their choices, those kids didn't choose any of this. They didn't ask to be born into a constitutional crisis. They didn't ask to be at the center of the most controversial royal story in modern history. If the surrogacy claims are ever officially substantiated, these children would be the first royals in history to have their titles stripped, not because of anything they did, but because of decisions made for them before they could speak. And the person who put them in that position is Harry, a man who spent his entire adult life arguing that the institution was cruel and that children shouldn't be sacrificed for the crown. He walked away from the family specifically because he said he didn't want his children to go through what he went through. And yet, here they are, in a more precarious position than he ever was, caught in a crisis entirely of his making. If they grow up and understand what happened, if they realize that their whole public identity was constructed as part of a brand strategy that fell apart, that's going to do damage that no amount of therapy fixes easily. Harry, of all people, should know that. So where does this all go from here? Because the interesting thing is that the solution, if Harry genuinely wants one, is incredibly simple. A medical record, a verified birth certificate, a statement from the doctor who was there. Any one of those things ends this tomorrow. Not in a year, not after a court case. Tomorrow. One document, and the entire conversation stops.